Hello, fellow musicians. Welcome to my gravicembalo col piano e forte, as the piano was once known. Today we simply call this large instrument the piano. The birth of the modern piano was due to the fortunate concurrence of the demands of one Ludwig von Beethoven and the Industrial Revolution. Beethoven wanted bigger and more sound, and the cast iron plate or harp of the piano produced by factories made this possible. With the exception of a few specialized patents, the modern piano hasn't changed much since Franz Liszt's time. This is a Steinway piano made in Hamburg, Germany in 1961. It is a Model S for short. It's about 5 feet 1 inches long and weighs about 550 pounds. It has no less than 12,116 parts, most of which are not visible, and why the typical pianist relies on a piano technician for the maintenance of his or her piano. This piano obviously was made in Europe, where 2 pedals, if you'll come look over here, are more favored, as opposed to American pianos, which have 3. These 2 pedals are the only ones basically used anyway. The right pedal is known as the damper pedal, which raises and keeps the dampers off the strings until the pedal is released. The left pedal is called the una corda pedal, which when pressed moves the keyboard to the right, which in turn changes the position of the hammers to the string. The hammer hits fewer of the strings than when the una corda is released and produces a softer tone quality. Here's the una corda with and without. Now let's consider how a piano works. A key on the piano's keyboard causes a padded, often felt hammer to strike the strings. The hammer rebounds, and the string continues to vibrate at its resonant frequency. These vibrations are transmitted through a bridge to the soundboard, which more efficiently couples the acoustic energy to the air. The sound would otherwise be no louder than that directly produced by the strings. When the key is released, the damper stops the string's vibration and the sound. The sound produced is in response to a pianist's touch on the keys. The greater the velocity of a key press, the greater the force of the hammer hitting the strings, and the louder the sound of the note is produced. The piano is polyphonic, meaning that it can play many voices at once. If you'd like to look, I can demonstrate. The typical pianist can finger chords with up to 10 notes. And cluster effects are possible with as many notes as the player can depress on the instrument. The single line melody that works for the trumpet is counterintuitive to pianistic writing. A piano can handle a lot of melodies and chords at once. The piano is also consistent in dynamics across its registers. You can play a triple pianissimo to a triple forte on any note. The tone color is different in the different registers, however. So, for example, in Brahms' opening of his Fantasy in G minor, we have forte in the low register. Unlike wind instruments, however, a pianist's breath does not directly interrupt the ability to play the instrument, so a pianist can play very long lines with very little breathing room. We do have to think about the limitations of our fingers, however. You probably don't want to play all 6 notes that are possible, or 7 or more if your hand is that large, just because you can. And you also have to consider what order you might want to play the notes of a chord. There's an F minor chord, but if you are composing an F minor chord and you want the pianist to play all of that at once, it probably won't happen. It will have to be arpeggiated. So be careful in your piano writing that your notes lie pretty much underneath the hand, basically an octave. There might be several notes you can put in your composition for that one hand, but don't stretch the hand. And don't make us contort ourselves by playing certain combinations of black and white keys, such as that type of a chord, just because you think it sounds cool. It's probably not playable. The range of the piano is the greatest of any instrument excluding the pipe organ. The lowest pitch is an A0, the highest is the C8. That's to say its high range goes 4 octaves above middle C and a little more than 3 octaves below middle C. It has 88 keys, 36 blacks or sharps, and 52 naturals. The master composers make use of the entire range of the piano. Student pieces are typically within the range of a C2 to a C6. In other words, the entire range of both clefs plus 2 ledger lines on each side. Generally, the size of students' hands, however, and their body dictates their ability to play even all of the notes within this range, or even to reach the pedals. Most children younger than 10 cannot reach an octave with one hand, and their pieces generally contain 1 or 2 notes in each hand. One of several keyboard instruments, a piano is a member of the percussion family because it has a hammer that strikes a string as described earlier. It's a tuned pitch instrument. It's related to the vibraphone, the marimba, a celeste, a harpsichord, a clavichord, an organ, and even this little ethnic instrument I have here, which is called an mbira. It's a thumb piano. The resonator is a tortoise shell, and the metal parts are pieces of used scrap metal. The piano keyboard strikes strings, while an organ controls the movement of wind through its pipe. So a piano is called a chordophone, an organ is called an aerophone. Clavichord has a very simple mechanism by which the string is struck, and a harpsichord is plucked. I really don't want to discuss the timbre of a piano very much, to be honest, because I don't understand acoustic physics, waveforms, or mathematical descriptions of harmonies or harmonics. Suffice to say that our ears perceive the overtones and wave shapes that each string produces. There are 6 that are relatively perceptible and many more that are difficult to hear. We also hear the attack, sustain, and decay qualities of a piano. We describe the sound of a piano with words like mellow or bright or piercing, tinkling, or percussive, even cantabile. Piano technicians can adjust the timbre by voicing the hammers, that is, loosening or shaving the fibers of the felt hammers. This procedure changes the hardness of the hammers, which affects the partial frequencies of a piano string that it's produced. If you're interested in hearing more, we can point out the physics building to you. The performance itself of a pianist can be very demanding. Solo pianists are expected to play completely from memory. This is not necessarily true of other instrumentalists. I have seen many professional concerts where the featured soloist, for example, playing a violin concerto, uses music. The piano repertoire is complicated and memory lapses do occur. A performer needs to know how to escape from these incidents without stopping. It can be physically exhausting as well. A high level of coordination is required between the hands. I would say that playing is somewhat athletic. Hands can cross over each other at times. Accompaniment and melody can occur in one hand. Or there might be sudden changes in dynamics. And despite what everyone does, you still have to breathe. You're supposed to look relaxed, but the reality is that inside we're sweating it out. Depending on the type of music you're playing, you may look directly at the audience and engage them in the performance, but usually in classical music, one might have only casual eye contact with members of the audience closest to the piano. A pianist is supposed to be a poet and a storyteller, evoking all sorts of emotions from the listener, so the idea is also conveyed by the performer's countenance. It's as though we are painting a picture with everyone watching. We're using sound, though, instead of paint. Some of the strengths of a piano is that it's polyphonic, and a typical pianist is capable of producing as many as 12 pitches, as said. The piano can accompany as well as join in as a member of the orchestra. The piano has fixed pitches. As long as the player presses the intended key, she'll produce an accurate pitch. In an orchestra, the piano can support the timpani or other drum parts, as in a tremolo. It can substitute for any other instrument in terms of pitch. It's consistent in its dynamics across its range, and it's useful in composing music. Its limitations are that it is large, expensive, not portable, can be loud enough that parents might restrict a student's practice time. Like an organ, a pianist rarely if ever plays his own instrument in performance, so adjustments must be made from the bench height and position to pedaling techniques and even articulations in a given venue. The sound of a piano has a relatively short attack and a fairly quick decay without the pedal and cannot swell on a note. Special effects are possible on the piano, especially in prepared piano pieces. Henry Cowell, John Cage, and Penderecki pioneered the use of a piano using all sorts of materials, including nuts and bolts, cardboard, mallets, fingernail plucking, and scratching on the strings, while also sometimes playing the keyboard. These composers introduced the concept of putting the pianist in direct contact with the piano strings. These special effects are extreme. More typical effects are obtained in a combination of pedaling and articulation techniques to emulate raindrops, drones, and birdsong, to name a few. Despite its complexity, cost to purchase, move, or transport, and its lack of portability, the piano is probably the most universally recognized instrument in the world. Have fun!